Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our morning Bhagavatam class. This morning we will be discussing on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 10, verse 21. And the chapter is entitled The Departure of Lord Krishna to Dwarka. And the class will be given by Vrindavan Shri Radhika from ISKCON, Philadelphia. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Good morning, everyone. Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tina Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tina Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Chabihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Asatari Sata Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Asatari Sata Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Sikha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadara Shiva Sati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Gitter Govardhan Ki Jai. Mayapurdam Ki Jai. Vrindavandam Ki Jai. Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. ISKCON Harrisburg Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Bol. All glories ye assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories ye assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories ye assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga Hari Hari Bol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Pracharane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Pashatate Shatarane. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritha Naram Chaiva Narottama Devam Saraswatim Vyasham Jnatodaya Madhurayat Nastaprayashu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So here we are at Srimad Bhagavatam 1:10:21. So I'll read the verse and then we can repeat it together. Savai Kilyam Purusha Paratano Ya Eka Ashida Vishesha Atmani Agrigo Nebya Jagat Atmanishvare Imilita Mani Shishupta Shaktishu Savai Kilam Yam Purusha Paratano Ya Eka Ashid Avishesha Atmani Agrigo Nebya Jagat Atmanishvare Nimilita Matma Nishi Zupta Saktishu Savaikila yam purushu paritano ya ekashid avishesha atmani agregunye byo jagat atmanishvare namilitanatma nishi supta shaktishu. Anyone else like to try?
Savaikilayam purusha puratano ya eka asit avishesha atmani agre gunebhyo jagat atmanishvare nimilatatmanishi suptas shaktishu.
Anyone else?
Vaikilayam Purusha Puratano Ya Ekasir Avishesha Atmani Agre Gunebhyo Jagaratmanishware Nimilitaman Nishishukta Shaktishu. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Saivaikilayam Purusha Puratano Ya Eka Asid Avishesha Atmani Agre Gunebhyo Jaganatmanishvare Nimilitaman Nishisukta Shaktishu.
Okay, great. We'll do word for word. Sa, eka, sorry, let me get to my screen here. Sa, he, Krishna, Vai, as I remember. Kila, definitely. Ayam, this. Purusha, personality of Godhead. Puratana, the original. Ya, who, eka, only one. Ashit, existed. Avishesha, materially unmanifested. Atmani, own self-image. Agre, before creation. Gunebhya, of the modes of nature. Jagat Atmani, unto the super soul. Ishvare, unto the Supreme Lord. Nimilita, merged into. Atman, the living entity. Nishi Shupta, inactive at night. Shaktishu, of the energies. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. They said, here he is, the original personality of Godhead as we definitely remember him. He alone existed before the unmanifested creation of the modes of nature, and in him only, because he is the Supreme Lord, all living beings merge as if sleeping at night, their energies suspended. Purport. There are two types of dissolution of the manifested cosmos. At the end of every 4,320,000,000 solar years, when Brahma, the Lord of one particular universe, goes to sleep, there is one annihilation. At the end of Lord Brahma's life, which takes place at the end of Brahma's 100 years of age, and our calculation at the end of 8,640,000,000, 30 times 12 times 100 solar years, there is complete annihilation of the entire universe. And in both the periods, both material energy called the Mahat Tattva and the marginal energy called Jiva Tattva merge in the person of the Supreme Lord. This living being remain asleep within the body of the Lord until there is another creation of the material world, and that is the way of the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material manifestation. The material creation is affected by the interaction of the three modes of material nature set in action by the Lord. And therefore it is said that here that the Lord existed before the modes of material nature were set in motion. In the Shruti mantra, it is said that only Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, existed before the creation, and there was no Brahma, Shiva, or other demigods. Vishnu means that Mahavishnu, who was lying on the causal ocean, but who by his breathing only all universes are generated in seeds and gradually develop into gigantic forms with innumerable planets within each and every universe. The seeds of universes develop into gigantic forms in the way of seeds of a banyan tree, develop into numberless banyan trees. This Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of Lord Sri Krishna, who is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita 5.8 as follows. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Govinda, whose plenary portion is the Mahavishnu. All the Brahmas, the heads of the universes, live only for the period of his exhaling, after the universes are generated from the pores of his transcendental body. Thus, Govinda, or Lord Krishna, is the cause of Mahavishnu also. The ladies talking about this Vedic truth must have heard it from authoritative sources. An authoritative source is the only means of knowing about transcendental subject matter definitively. There is no alternative. The merging of living beings into the body of Mahavishnu takes place automatically at the end of Brahma's 100 years. But that does not mean the individual living being loses his identity. The identity is there, and as soon as there is another creation by the supreme will of the Lord, all the sleeping, inactive living beings are again let loose to begin their activities and the continuation of past spheres of life. It is called Suptotita Naya, or awakening from sleep and again engaging in one's respective continuous duty. When a man is asleep at night, he forgets himself, what he is, what his duty is, and everything of his waking state. But as soon as he awakens from slumber, he remembers all that he has to do and thus engages himself in his prescribed activities. The living beings also remain merged in the body of Mahavishnu during the period of annihilation. But as soon as there is another creation, they arise to take up their unfinished work. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8:18 through 19. The Lord existed before the creative energy was set in action. The Lord is not a product of the material energy. His body is completely spiritual, and there's no difference between his body and himself. Before the creation, the Lord remained in his abode, which is absolute and one. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Charas Vamanati Namane Snake to Surveni Development and Again, to run again on Jana Shalakaya Takshar and Military Tashme Shri Gurve Maha Shri Chaitanya Svapitanya Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Satadis Vatantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Kadar Shri Sati Gaur Bhaktivinda. So here we are. This is actually a very complex verse, and this is getting into some of the creation. So this canto is entitled Creation, and with this with this particular purport, it's getting into a lot of detail about the kind of life of Brahma, which is how that equates to our solar years, and where we are in the scheme of all of that, and what annihilation looks like at the end. And this is these are all very complex topics, and these are brought through the authoritative sources. So like Prabhupada said in this purport, the gopis must have heard this from an authoritative source, because this is very elevated knowledge. And so and we know that that they're not the gopis, but the everyone from Kurukshetra, they must have heard this, because they're lamenting Krishna's leaving. And because Krishna's leaving, they are reflecting on Krishna. They are reflecting on his manifestation here in material energies, and they're reflecting on his presence in material energies, and how that comes to be. And so this is all the katha. This is because they're lamenting, they're fainting because of the idea of Krishna leaving. And so this is a very dramatic scene that's being conjured here. This scene is very powerful. It's really illustrating the potency of Krishna's departure, and what that really signifies for those who are left behind, to feel like they're left behind, although Krishna is always in our hearts. And in this purport, Prabhupada really helps take us through the process of understanding a little bit of the cosmic creation, and how this all came to be. Now, it's said that we are kind of in midday of a day in Brahma. So, there are so many calculations, and I'm not skilled in them, so I'm not even going to attempt to try and pass them on to you, because it's beyond me. And so I'm going to keep it at the level that I can speak to, because this is very elevated knowledge. And great Vaishnava scholars within our own tradition even have spent their lifetime really trying to parse this out and understand it. Sataput Prabhu was a Prabhupada disciple, and he's the one that really created a lot of the structure for the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. And he has several books going into the specific cosmology of the Vedas and the cosmology of Srimad Bhagavatam specifically, and he helps break it down so that we can understand what is being discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam, because it is very elevated. It's very scientific, and someone as brilliant as Sataputta is, took a long time to really pull this out and analyze it and put it into ways that, through his books and through his papers that he wrote, put it into some understanding for other people and for the scientific community as well, because we know that there are so many different scientists, astrologers, physicists, specific physicists really kind of get into this area as well, that really have their theories and go into this. But Sataput and Prabhupada encouraged him to do this. Sataput wanted to draw from the Srimad Bhagavatam and really use that as the authority and bring it into the scientific community. And so, why is this important to us? Why is it important that we understand this? Well, this is the understanding of creation, and every spiritual path has some sort of creation story. And the Native Americans have their creation story, Christians have their creation story, and we have our way of explaining creation. And I don't mean to say story as if it's fictitious or not relevant, more in that it's their interpretation of creation, and it's their way of explaining it through the scriptures. And this is how we have come to understand creation. And the Srimad Bhagavatam goes into a lot of detail outlining the process of creation as it is through Krishna, through Vishnu. And there's so much in science about this Darwinian theory, and there's also the Big Bang theory. There's starting from this tiniest cell, right? There's one tiny organism that kind of expands and expands. And so there's a lot of different theories out there that exist in the scientific community, but they're all theories, right? They're all theories. They're theories because how can anyone really prove this, what's happening, in creation? And so they remain theories. So there's a really, I find him to be brilliant, but there's a brilliant devotee who's in England, Akandadi Das, and he's done a number of lectures on understanding these very topics as well, and also just understanding the soul in relation to the universe, and the soul in relation to creation and our existence. And he spends a lot of time in his lectures, the Atma Paradigm. Maybe some of you have heard of it. If you haven't heard of the Atma Paradigm, I definitely encourage you to check it out. The Atma Paradigm is something that Akandadi Das did. It's through the Bhaktivedanta Institute, where it's the science, kind of all the science heads come together. But Akandadi Das has really spent a lot of time going through the literature, studying Sataput's material, and putting together his own stream of lectures, which I've listened to about a third of them. And they're really you have to really focus. They're super sciencey, intense lectures, which I thoroughly enjoy. So I get into them. It's just, you have to really carve out some time for them, but they're worth watching because he really brings in this Bhagavatam or kind of Vedic perspective versus science. And everything in the beginning, in his first series of lectures, he talks a lot about the fact that in the Vedas, there are so many things that can be disproven. Like Prabhupada said, well, obviously the soul is there, because if the body dies, what happens? The heart stops, yes, but then everyone always says that when the body dies, the person is gone. Yes, thank you, dear Krishna Prabhu. So he put it in the chat, a link to the Atma Paradigm. So, Prabhupada has put so many things in there that, but the science has yet to be able to prove the existence of the soul, right? And a lot of doctors and PhDs and scientists will kind of not question it, but they don't talk about it. And so from our perspective, we're like, of course the soul exists. Of course, every living entity has a soul, not just humans. Of course, because this is what infuses us with life. If the soul is gone, the life is gone. And this is something that is well established in the Vedic literature. And do we take it for granted? Do we just take it as, okay, well, this was just passed down, and well, that's kind of partially how it needs to go, because how can we prove? We can prove through our own observation. We can say the soul's here, because without the soul, who's observing the energies of and observing the material activities? It has to be something more than just the brain, because the brain is flesh. And so there has to be something that's something beyond that, in kind of more of a subtle body that is absorbing this information and passing that on. And so I kind of, going into this conversation with understanding creation, it kind of all comes back to that, the soul. Well, what we're talking about here is we're talking about 4,320,000,000 solar years. So what happens as our soul is, the soul, not, hopefully we go back to Godhead, but as the soul is repeating in birth and death, and that's that cycle, that it will be continuing to come back until going back to Godhead, or until annihilation. And then when annihilation occurs, then what happens is that the soul goes into a sleep. And and Prabhupada makes a point here to say the sleeping soul does not mean the soul is merged or loses the individuality. The sleeping soul purely means that it is in a dormant state, because the soul, when it's embodied, either in a spiritual body or in a physical body, a material body, when the soul is embodied, it's engaging in activity. But in annihilation, the soul is incapable of engaging in activity, because there's nothing to engage with. There are no energies to engage with. Annihilation means it's gone, right? Annihilation of the entire universe. That's pretty serious, right? I can't wrap my head around what that would even look like. Is everything just kind of just gobbled up? What does annihilation even mean? What does that look like? But we understand from this purport that it means that annihilation means that we are in essence going into the soul is going into a dormant state and waiting in that hibernation, let's say, or dormancy, waiting for the next material manifestation upon the desire of Krishna to activate Mahavishnu, who's lying in the causal ocean, and by his breath, all the universes are seeded again. So this is where, it's really the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, but also he's saying Krishna is really the Supreme Lord of all. This is Krishna Vishnu in this form, but Vishnu is Mahavishnu. Okay. And so when he is breathing, and we know the story of Mahavishnu lying in the causal ocean, we see the bubbles coming up, and there's activity within those bubbles. And it's a very, I think for some people, it can be very esoteric. Like, it's so esoteric. Like, how can we even conceive of what this might be? But this is really the creation. This is, Mahavishnu, Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, has the ability to create, because he is the creator. All creation comes from the Supreme Lord, and he is the nothing. It says here in the Shruti mantra, it is said that only Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, existed before creation. So this is, of course, the one that gives you the little bit of a brain flip. It's like, well, how did he come to be? Well, we just don't know. So, Krishna, Vishnu, Supreme Lord, always existed even before Krishna. So wrap your head around that one. Like, huh? Okay. So somehow he was created, or never created. He was always there. He did pre-creation, which means he always existed. But yet, on his desire, he creates universes. And why does he do that? Because we read this only through the Shastra, that the Supreme Lord creates because It is his nature. He creates to give the spirit soul the material or spiritual body to engage in material or spiritual energies. He creates in order to have activity. Okay, because if the Supreme Lord existed in a vacuum of just himself, then what is there? So it's just we see this nature in ourselves that we can build a giant castle for ourselves, but if we're in there by ourselves, then it's not so easily enjoyed. We become lonely. And I've heard this through lectures with Prabhupada that the Supreme Lord wants to have associates, wants to have activities, wants to engage. And so through this process of breathing the universes and generating the seeds, which develop into innumerable planets, as Prabhupada says here, in every universe, that they develop in this way. And we know that the banyan tree, so we have the top and the bottom of the banyan tree, but the banyan tree is a reflection of the spiritual energies, the material energies. So they're reverse of each other there. And the banyan tree is also coming into these universes, representing the material energies and the spiritual energies, and attachment and detachment and all of these things. So Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of Lord Sri Krishna. Okay, that's pretty powerful. So Lord Sri Krishna, then, we know Lord Sri Krishna is the supreme. He is the creator, and Mahavishnu is creating under Lord Krishna. So and I really, this is really, I think, helps to clarify that the Brahma Samhita 548, it's let me offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here it goes into, this is, goes into the next verse. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, from whom the separated subjective portion Brahma receives his power for the regulation of the mundane world, just as the sun manifests some portion of his own light and all the effulgent gems that bear the name of Surya Kanta. So this is the next verse in Brahma Samhita. So it's 548 and 549. And so here I'd like to read this purport. This is short purport for Brahma Samhita 549. Brahma is two types. In certain kalpas, when the potency of the Supreme Lord infuses himself in the eligible jiva, the latter acts in the office of Brahma and creates the universe. In those kalpas, when no eligible jiva is available, after the Brahma of the previous kalpa is liberated, Krishna, by the process of allotment of his own potency, creates the Brahma who has the nature of the avatar descent of the divinity in the active mundane principle. By principle, Brahma is superior to ordinary jivas, but is not the direct divinity. The divine nature is present in a greater measure in the Sambhu than in Brahma. So here, this is just giving a little bit of a description of Brahma. And so we're talking about here, the age of Brahma, the lifespan of Brahma. And so this is giving us a sense. Krishna is determining when creation happens, when the universes are created. So this is one particular universe. And it says here in Brahma Samhita, this is the avatar of a universe, of one universe, not all of them. Okay, so there are many Brahmas, and I'm going to get this story wrong, but there is an example in when Krishna is summoning Brahma, and all of the different Brahmas show up, and he's like, wait a minute, I thought I was the only one. And so, we can probably in a small way experience that as spirit souls here in the material energies too, that we are just one of many, just as Brahma is one of many. And so it's easy to kind of forget the vastness, that our universe is represented by just one Brahma, just one, but other universes have their same, kind of, Lord over the universe. Brahma is the Lord over the universe. And he's given, in Krishna assigns this lifespan to Brahma. And it's the 100 years, but in our universe, every universe is different. So we think, or we believe maybe, but in our universe, the lifespan of Brahma equates to 4,320,000,000 solar years, which is a lot. That's a lot. And so, so if we're kind of, halfway through in the day of Brahma, what that means is that, there's still some time to go. And, we go through these different yuga cycles, and this gets into a whole other thing, right? So we have all these yuga cycles, and gosh, what are these things then? These yuga cycles. So we have all these yuga cycles, the 4 that repeat, and they have their own span of time, like 1.2 million years, and then, like 950, 1,000 years, and, don't quote me on the numbers because I don't have it in front of me, but, roughly 600,000 years. And we're in the Kali Yuga, which is, 430,000 years, somewhere, give or take. And so we're in the shortest of the yugas. We're also in the craziest of the yugas, but we're only 5,000 years into Kali Yuga. And so, so the annihilation is a good ways out. But that doesn't mean things aren't going to be difficult. It doesn't mean there's going to be some destruction and change and things like that. But we can understand from these numbers and from how each universe is born, we can at least try and understand what that looks like. So sometimes there's kind of these people that think, oh, the end of the world's coming, or this is happening, and but when you look at it shastrically, when you look at it in the Vedas, it doesn't exactly correlate necessarily with, at least the time frame that a lot of people might propose. It doesn't correlate so much with what's in the Vedas, what's in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So who's right? I mean, I'm putting my faith in the Srimad Bhagavatam, quite frankly. I mean, I think that's, to me, tried and true and tested, and it's been passed down. So that's kind of where that's where I hold my faith. But others may have differing opinions. Probably not here in this Zoom room, but in the outside world, there's differing opinions on that for sure. So what's the take home on all of this? So yeah, okay, great. So we talked about life of Brahma. There's lots of Brahmas, they're all over the place. They all think they're the one, but they're not. They all have their role as kind of the agent for the universe, for Krishna, the Lord, the universe, representing Krishna. But how does that affect us? What does that mean in our lifetime? And how we might interpret this information, and what do we do with it? It's like, oh, this is interesting to know. Okay, that's good. But what are we doing with this information? Well, I think for one, it gives us some context to where we came from, because I think if we don't know how we came to be, then it's we don't know where we're going, right? So understanding creation gives us an understanding of the goal of going back to Godhead, and understanding the goal of life. That even Brahma has an end. Brahma is not eternal. And this is made clear. Brahma has one life and an annihilation, right? And then it comes back in a different form of Brahma. So Brahma's life is much longer than ours, yes. But he's still also subject to similar energies. Some of these material energies maybe less so, but again, this is Brahma. But in our small human life here, to me personally, what this reminds me of is that I'm very small, and I don't mean that in a I've talked about this before. I don't mean that in a low self-esteem kind of way. We don't want to take it in that context, but we are very small. We're very small in the scheme of the universe. We're this time in life, so it's just barely a blip. These 60, 70, 80, 90 years we may live on this earth, hopefully we'll have nice long lifespans and be able to carry out all of our activities in Krishna consciousness. We have enough time to do the things we need to do to go back home. But this is such a tiny, 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 infinitesimally tiny fragment of time in the scheme of what is described in this verse today. So think about that. Like, gosh, we're here for not even a millisecond, and poof, gone. So, but what do we do? I mean, sometimes we look and say, oh, 100 years, gosh, that's so long. And we may take for granted that we have so much time available to us. And we think, oh, someone in their 20s may think, oh, I have forever, someone in their 70s may not think that. But we often, we may look at our life as the younger we are and say, gosh, there's still plenty of time. But as Prahlad Maharaj pointed out to his classmates, no, this is the time when you focus on your you focus on your devotional activities, you focus on learning and understanding Shastra and engaging in devotional activities to the Lord. And so when we are thinking about our own existence and our own lives and this flickering of a light that we are in this, in the grand scheme of the universe, how do we take that small little pocket of time and make it the best we can, right? So the activities, described here, is beyond our control. We have no control over any of this, but everything that we do in our day-to-day activities, we do have control over. So, I often will find myself coming back to the basics, because I think it's the basics that ground us, and it's and the knowledge of the bigger picture provides context for the basics, right? And when we can balance the knowledge, that jnana, the jnana yoga, right? If we can balance the jnana with the daily activities and in the daily activities working in bhakti, then we have a good recipe for life. And even too, thinking about things that may come into our lives that are inconvenient, or just might be going through a difficult period, or maybe a difficult year, 2 years, 5 years. Just remembering that in the scheme of things, it is a small amount of time, and we just need to kind of work through and get to the other side. So in remembering our where we are in all of this creation, thinking about every single day that we're here, thinking about what we can do to make our life better. And there was a verse I had pulled up, and I closed it accidentally. I think it was Bhagavad Gita 2:69. Bear with me one second, and I accidentally closed it. Yes, okay, I got it. So one of the things, although it's this verse is not directly related to the purport, when I read the purport, this Bhagavad Gita verse popped in my head, and I pulled it up, and then I accidentally closed it, because I didn't know if I'd have time to discuss it. But I want to bring it into discussion just for a minute, because it reminds me of kind of how we apply all of this. And this Bhagavad Gita verse is very very simply, it's Bhagavad Gita 2:69, and it's, what is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is the night for the introspective sage. And so how we spend our days, and what do we see as night versus time of awakening? And Prabhupada says there are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. The introspective sage remains alert in the night of the materialistic man. The sage feels transcendental pleasure on the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in a sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with his self-realization activities undisturbed by material reactions. So I like this verse for a number of reasons. And what triggered, sometimes it's just one word that might trigger a whole, going down a whole other direction. And it was just, the sleeping component of this verse, the living beings remain asleep. And while it was related to annihilation, it did remind me of this verse a lot, because so many living entities are asleep in their existence now. We don't have to wait for annihilation, And so what are we doing? When we see people that are out there and they're just, pleasure and sense gratification, it's not to say that we're not enjoying too. We're not engaging in sense, material activities. I know I am, but it's about, growing our consciousness and our awareness around it. So knowing that so many people are asleep and they have this opportunity to awaken, they have this opportunity to absorb themselves more in spiritual activities. And I like this, Prabhupada, the last sentence of this purport, Prabhupada says, he goes on with his self-realization activities undisturbed by material reactions. I think this is something that's a take home for me. Undisturbed by material activities. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be, engaged in it, but we're not getting ourselves disturbed over it. We're not getting so spun up over things, and that's really hard. It's really hard to do, but practice makes perfect, and it's about keeping these things in mind. Keeping in mind that we want to stay awake. We want to keep in that wakeful state of spiritual life. And not be asleep in the lap of the witch called Maya, to quote a great sage. That's Jeev Jago, by the way, in case you wanted to reference that. That's part of the translation from Jeev Jago. But we want to be awake and this is that Jeev Jaga song. It's like, wake up, sleeping souls, wake up. You're wasting your life decorating your body. You're wasting your life, satisfying your senses. And this is whereas you're asleep in the lap of the witch called Maya. That's just so colorful, so colorful. And so we want to wake up, and we want to wake, our fellow humans up, help wake our fellow humans up, because, like I said, annihilation isn't the only time when there's this sleep that's happening, because it's happening now. It's happening in existence right now, that people are just dead asleep. And how do we wake them up? Shouting in the streets, wake up, sleeping souls. But shouting in the streets is Harinam, Sankirtan, that is shouting in the streets. Because what does the holy name do? It wakes up the sleeping souls, and it's subtle, and maybe it's not right away. Maybe it's just something that penetrates and that comes back in another lifetime. But that's the holy name is there to wake us up. It is that alarm clock for our spirit, for our mind, to snap out of it, snap out of illusion, at least for a moment, and say, whew, this material world is tough, and there must be something else. And it's, so often people come to spiritual life, whatever path, doesn't matter. So often people come to spiritual life due to that realization alone. That realization alone is, this is hard, there must be something else. And so here we have the opportunity to share that. Someone at some point, and I'm trying to trace it back to who gave me this book, and I will figure it out. I think I know who it is, but someone gave me a book called the Bhakti Vriksha Manual. And it was on my bookcase for a while, and I was chanting one day, and I just happened to look up, and I just was like, I need to read that book, like right now. And so I pulled it down, and it's been on my bookshelf for, I don't know, 6 years. But I pulled it down, I started reading it, and it has some really good concrete ideas on how to build Bhakti Vriksha programs. And for those of you who are not familiar with Bhakti Vriksha programs, it's basically the concept that the temple encourages home programs every week. A week, at people's homes, you have a kind of leader for that community. So let's say you have ISKCON Harrisburg, and then you have someone that decides they're going to host 10 people at their home, or maybe it starts with 3. And they tell those 3 people to invite 3 more people that come to their house, and they meet every Thursday. And every Thursday they meet, and more people come, and they do kirtan, and they discuss shastra and have some prasadam. And then the programs grow. And from the Bhakti Vriksha home programs, then on the Sundays, they go together to the temple to see the deities and have a wider community. And then, and then all the different programs on festivals all come together from all the different regions, and they have the big festival. So it's kind of like this tiered approach. And I kept thinking, like, why isn't more of this happening? I don't know. Like, it seems like a pretty good model to me. So the whole concept with Bhakti Vriksha is, okay, so you get up to 15. Let's say you're one of the leaders of your home's, kind of community, Bhakti Vriksha community. Once you get to like 15, you cut in half. And then you assign a new leader, and you say, you're going to now hold Bhakti Vriksha at your house, and I'm going to hold the Bhakti Vriksha at my house. We're each going to have like 7 or 8 people in our group. And then we're going to grow the group and then continue to grow. And then as they grow, they split again, and you assign a new leader, and you say, okay, now you're going to have it at your house, and I'm going to have it at my house, and you're going to have it at your house. And then you have 3 groups now, and then they grow and they split again. So, and then they all come to the temple on Sundays. It's just like, wow, like every temple should be like facilitating this somehow. It makes sense. And that's really from the book. That was like the kind of concept was that this would actually be kind of spearheaded at the temple level, that to kind of assign like a couple of Bhakti Vriksha leaders in different communities and kind of put them in charge of building outreach further out from the temple. And to me, it seems like it would be the quickest way. Like even Harinam's great, and it's a nice way to kind of get the word out there and do some book distribution and things like that. But truly, how do we build community? It starts with relationships, and if you're in someone's home, it's a safe environment, and for people that are newer, it might be less weird or unusual. They can show up and be at someone's house and just be sitting in their living room discussing things and having some nice prasadam. And so it's a really great, it's a really great growth program. So here we're waking up the sleeping souls, but if we do it from that standpoint, from that platform, it can be a really comfortable, easy way to grow. So anyway, I always kind of go off on a tangent with some preaching things, but I think it's important to discuss too. So we have like 10 minutes left, and I have a contractor coming at like 9:05 or so, a little after 9. So I have to make sure I, get down there. But any questions or feedback or comments?
Thank you so much for such a wonderful class. And especially, I really like the point where you said that even during our waking state, we are still sleeping. That is so true. And especially from the Jeev Jago Bhajan, that we are still sleeping and we have to wake up. And I especially like the point that you said that to wake up the sleeping souls, including ourselves as Harinam, go out there and chant. And when you said that, interestingly, that we are starting back our monthly Sankirtan festival, our MSF this Saturday. We go from April through October based on the weather. So we're all excited, to start back up again this Saturday. So that was a very nice reminder.
Oh, good. It's a wonderful.
It was nice. Yes. We'd like to ask devotees, if you have any questions, any comments, any clarification, please do raise your hand, or you can just jump right in, ask your question. There was one point, let me see, I think I missed someone. Okay, there was one point that you said, Vrindavaneshri, that really, summarize the whole idea of Bhakti Vriksha. Because now we know that the Bhakti Vriksha is a tree of devotion, and it breaks up like how the tree does. But it goes back to the root, which is the temple. But we've seen situations, within our community, within our congregation, all around the world, that the Bhakti Vriksha is happening, but it's not coming to the temple.
Yeah.
how do we, what can we do to resolve, I don't know whether the word is resolve or encourage or educate, but how can we help devotees to say, this is great, but you got to come back. The root is the temple. Like if we look at the picture of Lord Chaitanya with the Bhakti Vriksha, what's the word? Logo, I think, lack of a better word. They have Lord Chaitanya on top, I believe, and then all the trees, which is the Bhakti Vriksha, we're breaking up in different groups, but the top of it is Lord Chaitanya. But we don't see that happen. So what can we do to actually fix that issue, Prabhu?
Well, honestly, I think that it really comes down to the temple management to not see the Bhakti Vriksha programs as a threat, because a lot of times they start on their own. And I think sometimes temple management might see them as competition. And so I think it first starts with understanding why they started a Bhakti Vriksha program. Was there some sort of problem at the temple that wasn't being addressed that caused them to want to splinter off and do their own thing? So I think that's, the first thing is seek to understand, and I think a lot of times within the ISKCON temples, it's first seek to understand why the Bhakti Vriksha programs might be starting outside of the umbrella of the main temple, and not coming back. And I think that if I think temple management delved down a little bit with some of the Bhakti Vriksha leaders to find that out, they might discover that there are some areas for improvement at the temple. And that's always a hard discussion to have. But I think it can be really essential. It could provide a growth opportunity in the community too, to really embrace difficult discussions. And difficult discussions are something that devotees, I think, don't like to have a lot because they're always afraid to hurt someone's feelings or make an offense. But we have to learn how to have difficult discussions in our communities to delve down into deeper issues. And difficult discussions means that it's done in a way that is productive and proactive. And I think then from there, helping Bhakti Vriksha leaders understand that the ideal model is kind of to bring, the temple, to provide that wider community, to bring the Bhakti Vrikshas back to the temple as kind of a, center point. But and also too, the thing is if the Bhakti Vrikshas are also very different from the temple environment, this can be another challenge. So maybe it begs the question that, is it a temple that should be kind of the magnet for that particular Bhakti Vriksha, or is there a center that's a little bit more focused on like yoga and Western kind of preaching that might be a better magnet for that Bhakti Vriksha program? So I personally think that every city or town should have a temple and a center, because I feel like they have different audiences and slightly different, the same aim of Srila Prabhupada's mission, but different, audiences.
Different approach.
Yeah.
Because different people receive things differently.
Exactly. And I think the Bhakti Vriksha programs could feed into either of those two.
Because what I've also seen a challenge is that, Bhakti Vrikshas are growing, which is really, really great. But I've also noticed, now this is just Bhakti Vriksha per se, not the other kind of preaching, lack of a better word. But I've also seen that, Jayapataka Swami really put a lot of effort in his manual. He really, really did. It's an excellent manual. I think anyone that follows that manual based on the congregation, they can, based on the language, perfect. But what I've noticed is that it gets minimized.
Mm-hmm.
Jayapataka Swami's module is like a perfect, like Prabhupada says, right? As long as we don't change the principles, we can change the details, but not principles,
Exactly.
But yeah, because again, it's time, place, and circumstance, which is completely understandable. But I've also noticed, and it's sad that not only are the details changing, which is fine, Prabhupada said so, but the principles are changing at the same time. And then, it's like teaching 12th grade, it's like teaching first grade or 12th grade material in the Bhakti Vriksha, and it confuses them like anything. So I think it's really, really important that, we understand And this is the chance that I've had also, that Bhakti Vriksha is like, you know, I don't know if they have this concept in America, but I know where I come from, we have a tutoring concept.
Mhm.
If you if you're having problem in school, you go to a tutor,
Mhm.
you know, to get a more deeper understanding. And I look at Bhakti Vriksha from that angle.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we want more deeper, so we go for tutoring, and that's Bhakti Vriksha. But we get tutoring from what we're being heard in the temple, so it gets much more simplified and
Right.
layman's language, and
Right.
you know, and that's the Bhakti Vriksha module, you know, which is great because I'm like hands down with Jayapadaka Swami's module. But I think the encouragement of, you know, of bringing them back to the temple would it's like proper the whole house where the whole world can live in, kind of a thing, you know, because I think it's so important that we stick with the process of what was given to us as opposed to adding our own. We don't know much. I don't know much. I just follow what the gurus do. And that has been the concern that I've noticed, that, you know, to stick to the process, like you said, and just follow what was given to us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all laid out already. And like you said, we can modify the details to some degree for time, place, and circumstance, but
Yes.
the process already exists. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mhm.
You know, so yeah, it's a conversation point. I mean, it's definitely something that, you know, we're constantly discussing in developing Bhakti Garden in Philadelphia, which is more of a center, you know, and develop, you know, like what that looks like. And yeah, I mean, it's just how do we grow? So
Yeah.
we wake up those sleeping souls and
Sleeping souls, we gotta wake up. And like you said, it's the Harinam. And I think that's gonna really, you know, it's like going back to ground zero.
yeah.
Prabhupada started that in you know, Tompkins Square Park, and that's how he created to make devotees and started ISKCON and brought and woke up the sleeping souls, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Well, something for everyone to ponder.
Yes, yes. We have a couple of more minutes, just 2 more minutes. Would like to ask devotees if you have any other questions, any comments, any reflection. Please do jump right in or make, you know, and say something if you have anything to say. And if I'm just going down the list here so I don't miss anybody.
Yep.
And if you don't, we want to thank all of you for joining us. And we remind you, today's Ekadasi, at least, well, yeah, on this side of the world,
Here it is,
of the continent. And wish you all a very happy Ekadasi, and reminder to join us for tomorrow morning's class. Thank you so much, Vrindavaneshwari.
Thank you.
Vanchakrapativyascha kripasindavevacha patitanam pavanebhyo
Yeah,
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare
Have
Krishna.
a wonderful day, devotees. Hare Krishna.